Hey everybody, how's your Sunday going? I'm pretty sure this is working. God, it gives me such a hard time logging in with my new computer. You think it would be easier, but anyways, welcome to Sunday Live Chat. Let me know that you guys can see me okay. And yeah, it looks like we're on here. Give me a thumbs up there, Data Bomb. You can see and hear me okay. It's a Sunday Live Chat. Oh, good. About specifically the wondrous album known as Doubting Thomas, the Infidel. Yeah, I'm going to say in my whole career, probably the single most enjoyable experience of creation of a recording from the beginning to the end. The story begins upon the sort of goodness of when you first meet somebody and you begin to write and all sorts of stuff. And as we touched upon on the last chats, Dwayne and I moved eastward to Toronto, Ontario, to the apartment there at 540 Church Street. And this is where we wrote the better part of Vivisect and also Rabies, as done on the last two chats. In the scale of the Skinny Puppy Places, it's the Red Building here again. We've gone into detail about that. But yeah, Toronto, I think it even says on the liner notes of Doubting Thomas that Dwayne and I travel across Canada in 1987 and move into an apartment and just in time for winter. So it was kind of an idea that we didn't realize how productive we could be under circumstances. It's funny because I could see this clock out my window that had the temperature on it. It always said -12°C for a better part of several months. So we were not used to this type of cold, and it propelled us into working hard on the stuff that we were doing. You know, it's safe to say that we were still transitioning because we just kind of got our new setup that I've been sitting in for the last couple of chats. Today I decided to sit up here. It's a little easier, but yeah, this is the same setup that we used for Vivisect all the way through to the end of, well, I guess the synthesizers change in the process, but this was what we used for Doubting Thomas here. The main instruments was always the Pro 24 sequencer that I've raved about over and over and over with the Atari sequencer. And that was controlling the S900, which is a better part of like the drum sounds and everything like that came from. The ESQ was the main controller synth as well as one of the main synths throughout the album. It's super prominently featured. I realized when I listened through last night how prominent the ESQ actually is on the album. Also, one thing I realized is that a lot of the bass sounds, though they're sampled, were created on analog synths and sampled onto the Emax or the Mirage. There's certain qualities to the Curtis filters in the Emax and the Mirage that kind of brought on this, I don't know, I want to say the tonality of a lot of the bass on the album, I find, is brought on by, I guess it being a digital sample and being a compressed 8 or 12-bit sample, and something that, you know, we're kind of experimenting as well with the possibilities. So it was interesting. And then this was the exact setup where I'm going to say almost 100% of the album was written. You can see here the main control of the ESQ. We've got a Mirage here, the Emax up there. That is the original Emax. I believe this here was one of our Rolands that we had for a very short period of time, the Steinberg Pro 24 over here, the Akai S900 here, with our FTD 1000s up here on the radio and the PCM 41. This is an Ibanez delay, mainly used for guitar. This is the mixer, believe it or not. It's this tiny Boss mixer up here. And then we had this mixer here. I'm not even sure what it was, but believe it or not, as also mentioned on the original album's liner notes, we monitored through this amp head in mono through this sort of like what I would call rather ghetto cabinet. And yeah, this is how we recorded, believe it or not, Vivisect and Rabies and Doubting Thomas. So when I look back on that now and I think like, why didn't we just have, stereo speakers or somewhat, it kind of reminded me that it actually didn't sound bad. It actually was a pretty good sounding space. And I guess we were just used to it. So initially we had settled in and started writing, and I remember that I was getting used to writing with the sequencer. And for about the first, I'm going to say, I think I mentioned this before, I'm going to say a good number of songs into the recording procedure were not very good. And they were questionable as to where we were going. But then all of a sudden, we kind of stumbled across some of the things that would become a better part of Vivisect. But at the same time, there was these other songs coming up. I wouldn't say that they had the initial Skinny Puppy sort of identity to them. And so we started to put them aside, being that we could save them and all the information in files that we could recall and come back to. And we would also lay it down to cassette tape and have a reference there. And quite often we'd throw this tape on when people would come over and something like that, and they'd listen to it and they'd go, oh, what's this? And we'd be like, well, actually, we don't know what this is. So what was interesting is that the songs kind of like grew up to a point where there was maybe a good number of them before we started to realize that there was another project here. I don't think we even set out to make another project. It was really the case of what I don't think we even knew what we were going to do with it. If we had any purpose for it. It was kind of interesting. I've mentioned a lot of times too how at the same time when I met Chris Shepherd, I had gone to Jamaica, and I find that Jamaica was this this place where I guess I was getting a pretty large musical inspiration, but also there was something about the late night radio there. Here I am with my fellow Rasta Jabba, classic old school Bob Marley friend, and MJ, who you hear on the album, most particularly on the song The Run, where you'll hear the first voice, the sample will be, pass the spliffy, man. And then you'll hear him go, yeah, man, toenail. And we used to joke about how the word tunnel in Jamaica was actually toenail. And so we were trying to say, well, what is the word toenail in Jamaica? And so then we had some funny discussion about that, and that got sampled and ended up, as a lot of the source on the album. But, for me, Jamaica was a place of incredible inspiration. I've been there many times. This was the second time
as well. But Gary, what were those guys' names, anyways?
And what's really interesting about this here is that
so we met
this recording here features the part where I actually I'm capturing a sample that is on the Doubting Thomas album. So I would sit and have the cassette deck, as you see there, and listen to the sort of like spoken word stuff that was going on late at night.
I think we went to
and I wasn't realizing what I was going to use.
The spider web, wasn't it? Yeah, man.
Wasn't utilizing, wasn't realizing
right,
what.
Sorry, excuse me. Are you, mostly on Johnny Carson every
I guess here it is.
Yes, you come here to deal with that one. Yes, that, I never just felt right, and I, so you're feeling confused now because you made.
Okay, Kevin, say goodnight. Good night from Jamaica from night one. I'm sorry we can't get into any more graphic detail here.
That's really funny because I'm like 27 years old in that video, and it just kind of blows me away that, you know, time has kind of like zipped by as fast as it has. You know, currently just about to turn 62. It's just kind of warps me to think about, you know, how long ago really everything is. And it's really not that long ago. It really seems like just yesterday. So I would do a lot of that, where I would sit and just tape this late night radio stuff. And I had no idea what or for what purpose, but I would collect these cassette tapes and sort of like have them. I guess I had a sort of like hunch that maybe I could utilize them for something in the future. The thing I liked about it was quite often the material was so raw. Like people would be talking about really their innermost feelings, and really talking about, like, you know, getting real. And I thought that was something that you never really heard. I mean, you used to hear talk radio like that in America, but, you know, in Jamaica, you know, aside from all the spirituality and liberation and stuff from everything, you know, I was also learning. There you can see the circle on my nose there. That was the very inception of like the whole sort of basal cell situation. That was part one of it. And yes, I did go to Jamaica with Ogre. It's nearly 20 years ago now. And these guys were really inspirational. I think that the whole essence of the Jamaican sort of sound system was what was always hugely inspirational to me. The way that the way that they would speak in between, and the way it would become part of the music. And so that really became inspirational to me. I believe even Simon captured an image of their sound system here for the cover, the second edition. And what was awesome about the Jamaican sound system is that you can see on the bottom, it's all the bass, and then you would have the midsection and the highs, and they would have the ability to shut off the bass and just run those little tiny tweeters up there, and then kick in the bass with, I'm going to say, you know, 5,000, 10,000 watts of power, and it would just be mind-boggling. But this experience in itself really inspired me, and I think I carried it back and was ready to wherever this was going to lead. I mean, certainly the whole sort of Jamaican patois accent ended up in several different variations, not only Doubting Thomas, but in Tear Garden as well, and my solo stuff, all over the place. But I really also found that there was a guy in Jamaica that was named Gary G, and he was a guy that would do a radio show on what was then Radio 1 in Jamaica, it was called. And he would do this thing where he would sit and speak and talk over a lot of grooves, and a lot of the grooves were just this loop. And I swear he would play this soul to soul loop. And we're talking, this was at 1988. So he was playing this soul to soul loop over and over and over. And it was amazing, like how he would talk over it. And so a lot of that went into, there's a song on the EP called Turn a New Leaf, which is exactly the thing that I was experiencing, kind of like manifested into one of our own pieces. I even sampled the loop that he would play, which is a soul to soul loop, I believe. And a lot of the whole sort of vibe of that piece, sort of like, I think there was a couple of things that I did as an original reggae song, which is available here on the Patreon. and pieces like this. And then slowly but surely, with the songs that we were creating, I started to realize that there was a great sound between some of the spoken word and some of the music. So I should also mention, I don't know whether I should go into detail about the sample stuff now that I'm there, but you know, something that was also greatly inspirational to the album was a thing called The Power of Myth. It's basically Bill Moyers interviewing Joseph Campbell. And basically, it was a 6-part series. And I believe you can still see it on YouTube. It was done for the education channels. And Joseph Campbell had a way of describing myth and structure of how was really the most interesting and eye-opening thing about Joseph Campbell was his explanation of how life and time has repeated itself so many times. The story of Jesus in the manger with the North Star and the has been told many different variations over time and in many different cultures. And I thought this is just so interesting that I almost felt like when I listened to Joseph Campbell that I was like, kind of like getting the truth on a lot of things. And if you're really interested, I highly recommend going and listening to this series. It's somewhat good psychologically as well, because it tries to answer a lot of philosophical questions. And I also found him to be very captivating, the way he spoke. And so it was like something that Joseph Campbell is prominently featured in a song called Saved. And Saved is it's a song that it starts with, do you have a question? And I've taken his voice and sort of pitched it in various manners and answering himself, yes, I have a question. This business by living, by killing and eating, it's in sin all the time. And then God thinks. And it's like, as soon as I had that feeling of the power of certain words with the power of where the music could suggest, it almost felt, I guess it was like the first time where I was ever seeing the power of what we could do with music, and how you could make a story without vocals that would be compelling. Just the way you could throw in man against man, God against man, man against nature, nature against nature. Very funny religion. Whatever you do is evil for somebody. There's just so many messages that you can put in and place these things in a thematic way that all of a sudden I realized the strength of these type of things. The Power of Myth is also available on Amazon for the DVD, a 6-part series if you want to pick that up. And I'm not sponsoring that. But I highly recommend Joseph Campbell. And I will say that his inspiration and his whole inspiration was where the whole Doubting Thomas, the Infidel sort of theme came in, about questioning faith, religion, your place in where we fit in, and then a music that could feel organic and in touch enough to make there's no way we had a theme to make an album that had this idea like in place. I think if we did, it would have been too overwhelming. So what we did is when we moved back to Vancouver in early 1989, we rolled into a studio called Vancouver Studios, and we were going to make 3 albums in a row: Doubting Thomas, the Cyberactive album, and the Hilt album. And that is what we did. We got into the studio and started, and I guess we just took each idea and got the framework together. And I'll start with each song and start talking about each song here. Clocks. I absolutely love Clocks. Clocks was a collaborative song between Dwayne and I, where I could still kind of experiment with the 64ths and 30 seconds beat rhythms that I was able to come up with Harsh Stone White and play around with that rhythm in such a way where I could also trigger little bits of audio that were sampled, the first loops really, in as a drum framework. But the sequencing that Dwayne did in this song was incredible. And still to this day, when I listen to it, again, it shows some of the Curtis filter sort of beauty to what the tonality between the sequences. And also we could tune in and really get the sound of the choir or the string that we wanted, which was always sampled in this case. I wish I could say where those samples came from. Dwayne would usually do the samples of the choir stuff and the string stuff. And I know he just, he would take things from just about anywhere and anything. And in those days, you really had to sample. There was no really such thing as sampling libraries. There was no VSTs. There was really anything yet. This was the first, weeks of release of the Mirages and Emaxes. And it was exciting, to say the least, though, when you would hear the cool choral sound. So for me, Clocks was always amazing for the combination of all those elements and the fact that it works so melodically. Again, Clocks was a song that we thought was introduced as a Skinny Puppy demo, but again, it wasn't fitting the framework. So it remained on the list for Doubting Thomas, or what would become known as Doubting Thomas. One of the most exciting things was to play Clocks live with Download when we had the full band in 1996. We did a Clocks as part of the set, and it was a rendition, and we would play with various forms of the backing track, so we could still play with Dwayne elements and such. But there was live drums and all sorts of new elements from Phil and Mark, and that was a blast to do. The Mood Swing. This is a Kenny. I'll call my songs the Kenny song. Okay, that's what Dwayne would have called them, the Kenny song. Mood Swing is a Kenny song. TR-808 sampled radio S900 with a lot of you're taking these small bits of a sample rhythm like the dun dun dun. Those are all just little samples of things from the radio that I'd always just take, and somehow I'd be sitting there with the beat, and it would form into this beautiful, it made sense somehow. And in reality, I really want to go back and make more music like that. And so the challenge is you go and you make across the scale of your keyboard, a sample on every few keys, so that you can get a pitch going maybe up in 3 semitones on each. And then across that, you then wait and use that, or even use that as the formation of the basis of your song to then add rhythm to. And it creates these most incredibly unique songs. Again, by this point in life, I think I'm pretty heavily inspired by Ryuichi Sakamoto's album B2 Unit, particularly a song called The End of Europe. Well, that sun just loves to come in and get me right at this moment. And it doesn't do this all day. Thank you, son. But it's a fabulous album by Sakamoto. Again, as well, with wonderful radio on the top of the setup, as you saw there. I could fly in radio and sample that and have that ready to go. But I flew in the radio, the Believe in Jesus, all that stuff. And then just, again, it's one of those crazy things where it's just, I still can't figure it out, how it's not like turning it on and it's like the wrong sample. Well, that had to have happened a few times. But in this case, the flukes were always, I call it the happy accidents. The Believe in Jesus and all that was an entirely happy accident. The song was incredibly minimalist and kind of opened the door for what was inspired at the time by a cross between Sakamoto and Chris and Cozy. I think Chris and Cozy at the time had done some stuff that had some delicious bass, kind of like bass, I'll call it modulations, And so like main part of the mood swing was the relationship with the modulations. Very minimalist too. Father Don't Cry, it's funny. That is a Kenny song. Fastest song I think I ever wrote in my life. I was waiting for Dwayne and we were going to go out to dinner. And so he was upstairs in his room getting ready. And while he was getting ready, I basically wrote the better part of the song, which consisted of a hand-played drum beat and then a sequence and then a second sequence. And they were lucky, beautiful Adrian Sherwood drum samples that kind of like were, in those days, I'll say that was almost like signature song in itself type stuff. And so Father Don't Cry is the signature Sherwood samples. There's a lot of samples in the song from one of my favorite films of all time, of course. Again, The Pit and the Pendulum. That movie has just so many delicious tidbits for sampling. Yeah, all the "You are wrong, sir, I swear, you are lying, sir, I was afraid that it's not satisfied." They've got it all basically dictated here. But I always found that there's something about The Pit and the Pendulum. It's one of those movies you see as a kid and it does something to you. That, along with The Legend of Hell House, was like two movies that I saw, you know, probably at a young age. It kind of like left me inspired for the rest of my life. But Father Don't Cry was a song that was also put together by an edit that was made by Anthony Valsic, that he put in the dance, motherfucker. And I think that really brought it together. What's important to point out about Doubting Thomas and the album was the way that it was made. Because it was made at home, first, like in the apartment, all the songs were pre-written. There wasn't anything like live jammed in the studio. There were parts jammed on top, like radios and rototoms, most prominently, and other things such as vocals that we'll talk about, guitar even. But most of it was pre-written in the apartment at home. And then so by the time we got to the studio, we had the setup there with the Pro 24, the keyboards and everything like that. And what we would do is we would lay the idea down to a digital audio tape at the time, a DAT, and we would mix it through an MCI console as best as we could. Dave Ogilvy came in and he helped us mix the songs at that stage onto the DAT. So we had like some really nice, good, punchy dynamics and really nice songs, but the job had barely started as far as like the assembly of what would become the part with the tape voices. And this was a really unique time because we took it from there. I took it with a guy named Mark Raymar, and he was the only time I ever worked with him at Vancouver Studios. The only picture that we have of Mark was in that Hex on X on X video that we showed in the Rabies chat, where he's walking around. He's the other guy there with the curly hair. He was the assistant engineer on that. But I realized that with Mark, we could try this machine that had come into the studio, which if you look it up online, you'll find very little information about it. And it was made by SSL. It was called the SSL Screen Sound. And what it was like one of the very first forms of digital editing, audio editing, that had a linear box-shaped form that it actually, what was weird is that it went diagonally. And it was mind-boggling because at that point in life, you hadn't really seen this yet. I mean, Pro Tools was not around yet. Anything of that nature, I don't believe I'm almost certain that this was maybe one of the first digital editors that had come about. So a better part of Doubting Thomas was reconstructed. It says in the credits, reconstructed. And it was basically the most important phase because the songs did not run as they were mixed. They were basically sort of like re-edited to create breaks, re-edited to create a section that could feature something, and then thus apply the tape voices. So I brought in some of the tape voices were applied previously in the mix procedure, but a better part of them were laid down from the Emacs or straight from VHS tapes on the SSL screen sound. So this is when it really started to come together as far as like the story ability, where I could take a song and if it didn't have, say, it had a couple of tape voices that made some sort of direction and maybe didn't have a finality to it. And the most amazing part, and now when I listen back onto it, I kind of wonder how I did it, because the only sources back then, there was no internet. So basically you had to get videotapes, TV, or recordings. So it was a little harder to come up with stuff. And a large part of it was, I didn't want to spend, a year finding things. So I had to find things quite quickly. So a better part of my whole take on the album was going to be my input as far as storytelling with the tape voices, much like how it is in Rivers on Rabies. So this would become a theme for the album, I guess. So Father Don't Cry was a song that was basically more so put together in edit than it was in the sense of creation by sequence. So we begin to get into this mode here. F862, also known as Fatesaku, is a Dwayne song, of course. It was named after Dwayne's cat. And it has the wondrous feel of what I'll call the Dwayneisms. Melodically, structurally, the bass, the way the bass comes in, and the way that the whole song feels is just very much kind of like when I heard Dwayne with Water, kind of like very much the direction of where, like it's kind of like the inspiration is completely, you cannot determine what the source of the inspiration might have been, but it was compelling to say the least. I felt that for me, I was able to do the drums, but for me, I could do a deeper level of percussion by adapting the role of the rototoms into the recording. So rototoms, I was going to bring them up here, funny, but they're basically drums that you can turn, and you can create the pitch by turning them. So up or down, they're very flat. They don't have a long depth to them. And I had a rack of 3. So it's a small 6, 8, and 10. Or it might have been 8, 10, and 12, actually. I have them downstairs still. But most of like what sounds to be the ethnic drumming, or you might want to call it, could be tabla-esque type drumming, is the rototoms, tuned at various intervals and usually multi-track. This is when we're in Vancouver studios. I could easily multi-track a rototome take and then edit them by turning them on and off onto a final track, which is typically what we would do to edit, since we didn't have any form of visual digital editing, so it had to be done by ear. I think the part that really that I really like about the song, again, not only the Dwayneisms, but finding the tape voice, I feel like going away somewhere. I want to escape. This is something that Dwayne and I talked about all the time. And it's funny, at this age in life that we already had this desire to want to escape mankind. And I don't know if it was like being far out in the jungle in Jamaica or whatever, for me being away in Japan, like where I can't understand, anything. I just like being like in this situation. It kind of like gave me the feeling that we were always sharing this the story of escape, and the story of of realizing that, you know, the mankind and the rat race and the thing we tune into is the thing that does us a lot of the most damage in our inner soul. After that, you'll have no more doubts. Mama's taking you home. I mean, all this sort of stuff was like sort of like tying into the idea of what's wrong. Oh, never mind. The whole idea of how many times we hear that from people over the course of a day, and it seems that a better part of us probably have these thoughts kind of continuously. So F862 Fate Saku, Dwayne's cat was a gray cat. I tried to find a picture of Fate. I actually thought I had one. I think I've had one in a previous chat. Could not find it today, but wonderful kitty. And I love it when someone pays tribute to cat, of course. Next song on the list is one of my favorite songs. I think some people have asked me, what is the favorite song that you might have ever made in your career? And I always say Youch. And Youch, for me, has a very, very, very special spot. And it largely is because of the recording, as seen from earlier in the video here. Something about how the recording of how that guy fit with the music. And the music was a collab, Dwayne and Kevin. So you had the wondrousness of Dwayne's sequence, and then my ability to drum again with multi-track rototoms. I think almost all rototoms. And the way that it starts out, are you hearing me? Anyways, I got involved with some people. I go over there, drink a beer once in a while. I got myself entangled between two people, you know, and the guy's explaining his hurt. I never wanted to get involved between them. And it basically, again, was like tying into the emotion that could be expressed on this late night radio that was almost, I was like tying into it because I think at this point in our lives, around late 20s, both of us had gone through severe heartache with particular experiences in our life. And a lot of it could have been seen as also the strife between our band. We already had a great deal of for some reason, and I'll never be able to explain it to you, as to why there was so much, why there has been so much inner conflict within the Skinny Puppy world. Maybe it's just natural. Maybe we're just so different, one side and the other side, that it almost felt like we were touching into a place where our emotions were coming out and being expressed by other things, but in the music, appropriately so. So I found that to be, when I listen back to it now, I hear not only do I hear the person talking, but I hear us speaking about the things we spoke about. So that's what I found that was what's really special about it, is that in the end, there's a message. And the message is, in my estimation, you're driving yourself crazy. And then the guy says, so be it. I mean, we're doing it to ourselves. And I think that the message of that song, you know, really, really, really just it just keeps on driving it home. The power of the spoken word within music became just incredible. And I know that Dwayne and I, you know, we started to really think about, you know, the possibilities of what we could do with Doubting Thomas. And I know we had well-intended on continuing. You know, this is one of our wondrous adventures. But, you know, working with Dwayne, as far as like us getting in tune and being in touch with music, I don't think that there was ever a time where, you know, things were more in tune for us than, say, I don't know what happens if I do that. I don't know if it does anything. Anyways, being in tune with somebody is a great feeling, especially when you can mutually sense what's going on. I did one picture that I have on my wall, one of my favorite pictures. I think it is on the album, but this is like the the master. It was the only time we ever did a photo session for another project where we said, let's do a photo session for Doubting Thomas. And I'm trying to think if that was Kevin Westenberg that did that, but was extremely fun. Okay, let's move on to the song Hiding. Back to the Ouch Man, more of the Ouch Man. I couldn't get enough of that guy. He was always good to add. But this is the first song where you're going to hear some more of the Jamaican DJ Gary G, and that's him saying kind of a halting start to a song. That's how he would speak over the radio. That's just a sample from the radio, this guy speaking. And in those days, there was a lot of things going on with Nelson Mandela being released from prison. And we were emphasizing the whole pressure's on in South Africa. What's going on? The whole, let's bring rise to civil rights. Let's bring rise to equality. And also, again, Mirage bass, Rototom, just tying in with this rhythmic aspect of how we could see that, even though I know that we wrote all these songs thinking this could be a Skinny Puppy song or something, if you listen to them now, they all sound like they've got a place in this. It almost sounds like Doubting Thomas created itself. And that's what I like most about the project. Nagual Tone is a Duck with Kevin Drum song, and this was a song that samples could create a section. So, for instance, the violin section sample. So that was kind of like created like an avalanche song where these type of sounds came first and could create a change in a song that then, Dwayne would hear it and be like, oh, I get it. And then follow it, and having this connection with parts that we're not coming from some hand played stuff. It was coming from, as we used to call it, channeling, like something from the outside would bring in this part, because how would it just so magically appear when I turn on the radio when I'm about to sample? It'd be like this thing, and then it's like, wait, this works perfectly. I just used to marvel over that, and I'll probably say that till the day I'm gone. I will marvel over spontaneous samples from the radio airwaves. No more cotton candy, no more bad concerts. I think, like, once again, you're tying into sort of like the idea of being in a better space, of being happy. People wanting to be happy, people wanting to enjoy things on a level. The Run. This is one of Kenny. This is a Kenny song, and it was, as I was saying earlier, very inspired by an evening with MJ and Chris Shepherd. Pass the spliffy, man. Gary G samples are on it. What I loved about Gary G is it'd be like, you have to tell me now, is high fidelity is achieved by low distortion. True or false? I mean, I couldn't believe, and I'd hear these things and be like, I'd look at the cassette tape and I'd be like, did I get that? You're like, oh my God, I got to do something with that. Hi-fi is achieved by low distortion. True or false? And then the Mama and the Papas actually is the next song on the radio that comes on. But all of a sudden I'm like, wait, that works too. So this song was entirely created, inspired, once again, at the time, heavily by Ryuichi Sakamoto. And then the ability of adding my friends into the song, MJ, and then Gary G, and then Tonel. And I think MJ's in there. Yeah, man. Yeah, Tonel. It was just something about if happiness could be achieved by a certain sound, then by adding things that you love and people you love and things that you love and thoughts that you love should take you back time and time again to a place that you love. So I found that Doubting Thomas was getting spiritual. It wasn't something that was just merely an album for me anymore. It was a place to go where you could feel better. The song Saved. This is a classic Dwayne, Kevin, Kenny collab. The closest song probably to maybe one that we could have used for Tear Garden or for possibly Skinny Puppy. But again, a very important sort of point being addressed about, at the time, strict vegetarians. I'm a pescatarian now. I found that being a pescatarian, you know, I haven't eaten pork or beef or lamb or any other four-legged substance, but I have eaten chicken and I have eaten fish, and I don't feel good about it. As a matter of fact, I'll always opt for a vegetarian dish. But the thing is that it's answered at the end of Saved, you know, what this business by living by killing and eating, it's in sin all the time. And at the very end, says God says you have to say yes. It is. And then there's nothing we can do about it. Nobody's going to stop eating protein as the earth has outlined. I think there's a lot of sadness in the earth about things like that. And every single living thing on the earth deserves rights, I think. I don't kill any bugs. I'll save bees from the pool. Like if I see one, I'll go from the top of my window. If I see it, I'll run out there and get it. You got to have a heart for everything. And I think that the question in most important in mind in those days was, you know, what to think, how to think, how to be, what's right and what's wrong. And Saved is about that. It's about answering that question, which is kind of funny. It's not actually about being a vegetarian. It's about addressing core human issues and having like Joseph Campbell is almost like the voice of God to me, in a weird way. He basically opened doors that, you know, would lead to other avenues that would be like, you're growing up, basically. The thing that I like about listening to the album is I realized that I made it, you know, it's like not even 30 years old yet. There's something that's really great about growing and learning and expressing and later realizing that that's what you're doing. And I think that a lot of like the messages that are in Doubting Thomas are touching upon important issues that we want to talk about, but yet we're still finding ways to do it. Let's move on to the next song, Ideal. I really have to say Naomi McLeod, the vocals on the song, really, it was the closest thing to when we met Naomi. We said, we're really inspired by something like The Great Gig in the Sky by Pink Floyd, if you know what we mean. It's like a song that has amazing vocals, but no lyrics. And she's like, oh, absolutely. I fully get what you're talking about. And I think, I don't know how we met Naomi, but basically we knew that Naomi had been working with Sarah McLachlan and had done a better part of Sarah's backup vocals on the album. So we heard that she was excellent and very, 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 very competent vocalist. And she came in and heard the song. I think we gave a copy, of course, to her. She came in, listened to it once, and then went out there and one take. She laid down another second vocal take, which is complementing her first take. And I was just like goosebump city. I just could not believe it. I mean, it was not like there was no overdubs. There was no parts muted. There was nothing, you know. Today, I think that a producer would have gone through and maybe taken out a couple of the little like the lines in between, but it's as it was. And I wish I knew. I looked up Naomi online to see that if I could find something about Naomi, because certainly I was interested to see that Naomi could have gone on to great things. And I hope that she did, but I never heard from her again after this. It just kind of like, she just disappeared into the framework of life. Again, there was Rototoms, and that song also has I think one of the only appearances of guitar on the album, played by me. And yes, there is a big rumor that Jeff Tate from Queensryche was possibly going to sing sort of a passage on that. And at first we were hanging a lot with Jeff and Queensryche because they were in the next room in Vancouver studios at that time. And Rave was working on that album with them, and that's how Rave ended up doing some of the stuff on the Doubting Thomas album. And I believe we were going to have Jeff come in and do some stuff, but it just didn't ever feel like we had the right. It just didn't. I don't know. The feeling wasn't right. As much as I like Jeff and as much as I like those guys, it just never pushed us into the studio. And that was a great studio experience, though, to always have another artist in the studio at the same time. It was kind of like hearing some of the material and really getting into it. I remember Jeff was really inspired by what he'd heard, and I think he even commented about it on an interview that he'd done recently. I also remember Katie Lang was there, which is really funny. She was sitting there and talking to us about the music, and then asking us. I believe she was working in this next studio at one point, and was asking us what it was that we were making. It's funny how in those days that, what is this? It was like a different form of music altogether. But nevertheless, that was what we considered the framework of the album right there. That was really, if you look at like something like the cassette, the wondrous Doubting Thomas cassette. I don't believe this album ever came out on vinyl with this cover by Wax Trax. Yes, it was released on Wax Trax Records. I believe how that happened is originally we had been speaking with a guy named Dr. Death out of Louisiana. I believe Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He had a show called Dr. Death. And he was the one that originally on an interview asked me about some material if we had been working on other material, which I at the time had said, I believe we had. And after the interview, he said, I would like to release that material if you guys are going to release it, because we didn't have any idea about what we would do or how we would go about that. And I remember calling him up and telling him, okay, I think we got this album together, and it's going to cost you. It's really funny. I think I said it's going to be $12,000, and it's like, that's pretty cheap. And he said, I don't have that type of money. There's no way I could do it. And then so the next day I got a call from Wax Trax, and Wax Trax was very interested, and thankfully, I think from a guy named Scott that used to work at Wax Trax there, had moved over from Network to Wax Trax, and had brought in some of the hype. And so immediately we found ourselves working with Wax Trax. And there was an initial cover done by Brian Shanley, but we didn't like it. Look at this, is a brand new CD, unopened even. And then he sent this. This is the classic original release. And actually, is this the one on TBT? Oh wow, this is the one on TBT. So let's tell you about that in a sec. But anyways, we liked this cover. We thought, I remember liking it right away, and I thought, like, what is that? And he says it's an old Christmas decorations. I believe a box of chocolates that were all crushed up. And he took a picture of it, and it ended up looking like that. And he forwarded us a whole bunch of images. from that I tried to find. I couldn't find them. And he ended up putting it together, Brian Shanley from Wax Trax. And oops, there was also a 12-inch, I also believe, also done by Brian, Father Don't Cry, which was, I think this was released on vinyl. Maybe you people out there can confirm with me. I believe this was released on vinyl. A 12-inch single by Wax Trax. It's also important to point out that Offbeat Records, when they released, some reason they wanted to release the Father Don't Cry, they redesigned the sleeve. And I believe this sleeve has something to do with Stefan Herweg from the German record label Offbeat, who I believe that's his grandfather. And yeah, reassembled for this. Let's talk about more of the songs from the album, particularly White Wax. White Wax is a Kenny song. And yeah, one night, I've mentioned this before, we went and met Clive Barker. And he signed the book for us. I think I've shown you this, where he signs this book. This is in October 1987. And we were all young. I would have been like 26. Clive was even 27 or 26. And we talked about, we went with Gary Smith, and we were talking about an idea that Gary has had for years called Pressure Head. And there was a fairly articulated story on it, where after meeting Clive Barker and expressing some of that to him, he said, oh, just write it out and just go for it. And so I know that night, both Dwayne and I came back home to the apartment at 530 Church Street and began to write a couple of pieces. And so White Wax and the theme from Pressure Head, both being written under the guise of thinking about horror movie film scores, particularly. There's some Joe Spinell samples in there. I remember that after we made these, we gave them to Gary, and he used the theme from Pressure Head as the impetus to begin writing a script with a guy named Alan Zweig. And they began a script that was written, I believe it was almost done. And then they realized that Alan Zweig had another story called Chunk Blower. And Gary said, hey, you know, Chunk Blower might be a little easier to make, because it was a short form story versus the Pressure Head story is more of a pretty, like a long form story. And I think it involved more of an alien type thing. But so the whole story of these is funny. The meeting of Clive Barker rolled into White Wax and rolled into the theme from Pressure Head, and thus rolled into the creation and the development of Chunk Blower, and then thus rolling into the inevitable scoring of Chunk Blower, which we did do. So it was kind of cool that we got into making a score for a horror film, which is something we wanted to do clearly at that point. Theme from Pressure Head was a Dwayne piece. And I think I went to bed and I woke up and he put a better part of it together. And I put in like the samples of the bicycle spokes and sort of like the otherworldly, like squelchy samples. And yeah, I think we performed that song live on the first Dead Voices on Air tour with Mark. It's also important to point out that with the next song, Come in Peace, this is a Kenny song. And this is like, Come in Peace is something that's like definitely, if you listen to some of the stuff back and forth and rap, stuff like the Double Cross, Center Bullet and stuff, sections of like that, this Come in Peace is definitely probably one of the oldest songs that was written, in the sense that I probably wrote it in my apartment at 10:45 5 Harrow Street before going to Toronto. But the creation of the whole theme of it with The Day the Earth Stood Still, I don't care about the rest of the world. It was like, it's not just you and Mr. Carpenter, the rest of the world is involved. Again, it's about caring and about like ever have something to do with Kevin and writing songs. It'll always be about heartbreak or caring or being lost. That's usually my theme. But I was big fan of Gort. And you must go to Gort. You must say these words: Klaatu, Barada, Victo. I always test people and say, what's the words? And if you know those words, and you know those are the words that I'm asking you about. Classic film too. Just has to be one of my favorite sci-fi movies ever. It's important to point out that on White Wax and on Come in Peace, I remember Tom Ellard visited the studio and we were mixing, and we put Tom in front of the mixing console. And so here we are in the studio here making Doubting Thomas. You can see our entire setup here. This is that MCI console. This is I can see here that we had the S330. This is the S330 sampler on the screen right there, the Pro 24, and that's the only new addition here. I don't see any other things here in the picture, but yeah, this was the room and the day where we mixed Come in Peace, and this here is the day where we made White Wax, or not made it, but mixed it. Tom mixed it. And the thing about what was nice about working with Tom on that is his ability with dynamics was what made the song interesting. We didn't have any idea, I don't think, how to mix yet songs that were related to sort of more like a theme of film. And you can see Dwayne up there with it looks like the Mirage. I'm going to say the Mirage, the ESQ there, and the Emax. The S900 here in the rack. You've got the STD 1000s, just the standard rack. Same room for Hilt and Cyber. Yep. I don't know what my shirt was there. I'm pretty sure that shirt was some sort of reggae shirt. Yeah, but Tom, great thing about Tom coming in and just like, you know, being like a great inspiration, as he always was. Just helping along, like in a place where we thought like, what are we going to do with these ideas and how are we going to mix it? And then Tom just comes along and, you know, basically sealed the deal. That was basically the content of the regular album. And then I guess along the way, what year was this? I guess around when? 2004? Was it? Simon can chime in. Came the idea of releasing the special edition Doubting Thomas with the you can see there it's a modified, what looks to me a modified version of the, maybe not though, of the PA in Jamaica, plus our favorite pick, the flowers, and looks like it's got the Father Don't Cry art and the original art on the disc there, started by Simon Paul. Came in vinyl and with nice gatefold inner sleeve and some really nice colors in the vinyl. You know, I have to say Artifact, I really like working with Artifact because if they're going to release something, you know, they're going to make, you know, really nice, well, colored vinyl, and not only one, you know, a few variations. Oh yeah, this is the one. The black and white one. Beautiful. And this version of the album features a bunch of extra songs. So they'll feature some of the extra songs that were on the EP, as well as let's see here, on the EP, as well as some stuff that was discovered after, sort of like, when you're searching through things and all of a sudden you realize, oh, wait, here's a song that was perfect. Like, for instance, THC is an unfinished Doubting Thomas idea, mostly Dwayne. No voices or no editing put in. So basically it was as it was Brap. I was able to play the drums on it, but Dwayne's melodic structure was there. And it's beautiful. I mean, when I listen to it, I think like, how could this song have been overlooked? But it was. Oh, these pictures are all going small. Why are you going small on me there? Yeah, so THC was I'm going to say that was maybe one of the last songs that was written in Toronto before we left. It was a song that what's funny is that there's a couple of songs on here like Jethro, Kryland, Port Hugh, Make Me Laugh, which I'll talk about in a sec. All of those songs are kind of discoveries of songs that we did that we thought like weren't as interesting. Yeah. Dwayne had cool jackets. We used to wear leather jackets, even though we were vegetarian. Kind of silly, huh? The pictures keep shrinking. But as usual, Dwayne did have the best hair. And, that was a big factor as well about, Dwayne's personality. THC was a Brap. Turn a New Leaf. I spoke a bit about this earlier, about it being a soul to soul Gary G speaking, and it was inspired by what Jamaican radio sounded like at the time. There was a just classic experience of monitoring that song like day in, day out with him speaking on it. It was like that was the impetus for that song. The ending, a lot of people ask me, what's up with the ending? And it was kind of like, I guess, intended not to be included up to that point. But for some reason, when we listen to it back, it's just a complete sort of like anarchy on the keyboards at the end. And someone said, is that the effects of marijuana? And it said it very well could be the effects of marijuana. If you listen to the end of Turn a New Leaf, you'll know exactly what I mean. Excrement was a Duck track much in the line of Rain from the Rabies album, in the sense that they create these scapes that were created largely from samples, and was just something that was like, I don't know. I initially thought that Excrement would probably end up with Skinny Puppy, but because it didn't, it ended up happily having a home with Doubting Thomas. Movie 13 is a Kenny song, and it was made at 857 Beatty Street in 1989. So when we moved back from Toronto, the first place that Dwayne and I moved was this Artist Live workspace. It's funny, it's not listed on the chart of places. This is an extra place. The reason why it's not listed is because I only lived there for less than, I'm going to say, April till December. And this is when I wrote movie 13. I used to, if I'd write a song, the lady downstairs would complain. And she was apparently some lady, that hip lady who had moved in there. She wasn't even an artist. She was just like complaining about every noise. So apparently if you moved in there and was making music, that was not okay. So movie 13 was a song that basically was made that annoyed the lady to no end. And it was made all from samples from the Mirage and everything that had been collected over time, sort of like remnants of stuff. Didn't make it into the session for the Infidel, which again, I don't know why. I love it. At the end, it's a classic ESQ, ESQ experience. That Problem Child, a Kenny song. Again, another song that's much along the lines of as we're getting into the Tear Garden, I started getting into the, are you feeling down? Well, what can I do to up, down, or down? Sort of things. And then I started thinking about, you know, That Problem Child. I don't know. It was almost just like, I'm going to say it's like a quickly made song again, and a song where it was like, oh, okay, there's a sample about this, and then all of a sudden it became, oh, this is a That Problem Child. It wasn't like something you sit down and go, I'm going to write a song called That Problem Child. It was more like what it became. But there was like a deeper statement going on in there. It was kind of like, you know, now look, Charlie, something's come between us. What's wrong? We're old friends. Again, it was always talking about sort of like the strife within the band of Skinny Puppy, and sort of like illuminating that sort of kind of thought about, you know, why would that be happening? Right, Connie? Connie's saying hi. Magical Horse. This song was made in 1994 at the Subcon Studios in Vancouver, and is probably the last made song on the album, in the sense that all the songs that are contained. I made it for Music for Cats, kind of. We had no idea where it was going to go, actually, but it has the K2000 on it. It's really a statement on weed, about, you know, now, I mean, God, a lot of weed is legal, but in these days, the rights of people and everything for weed were always being trampled on. And so the idea of the horse eating grass 3 times a day was kind of like a tie into that whole mental thought. But yeah, it was the last song that kind of like fit within the framework when compiling the new edition of Doubting Thomas. Jethro was a jam circa 1989, possible SP early TD Park, Too Dark Park demo. But again, just the flavor, it was kind of like there was a certain tone to a certain thing that would all of a sudden say, oh, no, that has to be Doubting Thomas. It's the same with Krylan and Port Hugh, which were both jams, both braps, both recorded with the intention of coming back to, but never came back to. And then you discover these later on a digital audio tape, and you realize, oh, those are kind of cool. So, you know, rather than skip over them, kind of like realizing, you know, what the time period they're from and how they are really in the same flavor, then they tied right in. Make Me Laugh is a classic Duck song. It just really, again, ties into the whole, can you make me laugh? I mean, we always just had some thing about happiness and about having something that, like a song that could make us, you know, feel better by the music, or things that we were putting into it that could make us smile. But it was also made after the album. All these albums, or all these songs, I think Make Me Laugh, Blink and It's Gone is another song from 857 Beatty Street that I did. It was really about like, when I was splitting up with my girlfriend, I was like, had this like, sort of like morbid feeling of just how everything's just gone in an instant sometimes. And then wasn't really tying into how that thought would become ever more pervasive in my life as Blink and It's Gone becomes activated sort of like time and time again. And that leaves with the final message of the album, which is love somebody. That's really a Kenny fragment that I think is the message of the album, is that love and loving somebody and being respectful to one another and being kind and just sort of like having a kind heart is really my biggest sort of advice for anyone, anywhere, anytime, anything. Really what more advice could we have for each other? And that's always what it's going to be. I would love if there was a possibility to, if there had been a possibility to compile more Doubting Thomas, and there isn't anymore. Trust me, I've gone through pretty much everything, and there is nothing left. And I'd like to thank you guys for always forwarding some questions. Parmesium, you always have the first comment. It always seems to be magical and haunting. Sea poles, clocks, yeah. Ersa Grove, happy birthday, Dwayne. Yes. Yes, Dwayne's birthday the other day, his 59th birthday on February 1st, and then Phil Western's passing away day, February 4th. Been quite, it's quite a week of remembrance. McNeely Sarkas, oh my God, greatest record ever without the name Skinny Puppy. Thank you. Arvin, I love this record. So many late night acid trips. Larry, excellent. Was not expecting this. I'm looking for questions here, folks. I've not read it yet. I remember when I first got it, Kay says, expecting SP without vocals, but ending up in a different and exciting sonic landscape. No questions. Thanks for your insight. Where's your forest? Really looking forward to this. Some insight on sample sources would be cool. As I said, you really need to look into Joseph Campbell and the Power of the Myth. Power of Myth is really an awesome thing to look into. Matthew G, love this album and the reissue. Was DT a planned Voxus soundscape project? Some of these envisioned for SP and for Tiergarten. I think that they, as I said earlier, they became what they were on their own. We were lucky enough to be able to write so many extra songs to be able to form a band or two or three. Griffin says, this album is very near and dear to my heart and was given to me at a very young age. These songs are expressions of feelings that I was not able to put into words at the ripe age of 9. It was an overall therapeutic experience for me, so I have no question. I just want to say, although your projects are great, my SP is my favorite band, this project is special. Thank you for making it. Thank you, Griffin. Sharon Mayer, I have questions about the track Saved. How did you end up sampling the Bill Moyer, Joseph Campbell interview? Yes, I think you ended up using both the background music flute and interview clips in the song. Was there any particular reason you chose the spoken samples you did? So they aren't in order. I never sample a section. I would always sample something if it had to make the last line seem relevant. So move forward and keep on looking for the next line. It's something the same format as created on the Rivers track on Skinny Puppy, where you follow the concept and by the end you should have somewhat of a story, even though you're taking sources from different places. It's actually quite fun to do too. I've had a lot of lyricists say they've done work like this where, they'll write lyrics and then throw them in a pile and then pull them out one by one, and that'll be the order that the lyrics go. Sometimes that works better than really, better than you think. Thanks for the question. John Leonhard, heard this whole album again last week. It's my top 5 album of all time. Really is timeless. Thanks, John. J. John, what's the story behind the newer sounding tracks, THC and That Problem Child? Yes, they were newer, and they didn't get the treatment that the rest of the albums from that songs from the album did. They didn't get to go through that lovely MCI console. Joey Galvin, I have so much love for this album. I regret not getting the Artifact release on vinyl. Yes, I'm going to try and have to hunt down a copy somehow. I have a vinyl test pressing of Father Don't Cry that you signed to one of my awesome DJs. Okay, well, no question. Jeremy, one of my favorite albums of all time. A lot of people say that to me. Such a huge influence, and I'm so happy to have like that feeling that it makes people, because for me, it's like, I think if I had to pick one album out of my past, it might be my favorite as well. I can't wait to hear you talk through this one. My question, were you and Dwayne really booked to perform the Cyber Arts Festival in Pasadena shortly after? Yes, we were. And I believe there was something to do technically with us not being able to do it. But yes, we were trying to find a way to do that. And it's amazing you bring that up. I had completely forgotten about that. Brutus Jones, I read in a Swedish magazine at the beginning of the 90s that material for Doubting Thomas was music that you and Dwayne improvised during live shows with Skinny Puppy, and Ogre wasn't able to perform on stage. And when did drug addiction become a serious problem for the band? Well, no, we didn't ever perform any of these songs live, except, as I said, mentioned Clocks with Download. But no, these were songs that came up in home. We did write a number of jams, as we called Braps live improvs for Skinny Puppy. None of those ended up turning into songs that we made for another album. Excuse me. Oh, when did drug addiction become a serious problem for the band? Well, let me just say that all the way along, like, I guess I met Dwayne in Mind, all the way through Mind, Cleanse, Vivisect, Rabies, Too Dark Park, and then I'm going to say, yeah, Last Rites. I'm going to say just after Last Rites is when I noticed things with Dwayne going a little bit south. And then as we got into the process, everybody was a little messed up. Even me. I never injected drugs or anything like that, but I ended up chasing the dragon, as they might say. And I don't even know why. I just think that it was so stupid. I remember Vancouver becoming it just rolled with the punches. It was like, oh yeah, I mean, everybody's smoking heroin now. And be like, why? Nobody said why. You just saw it and did it. And I started thinking after a while, why? This was bullshit. But it took me a little while to like really clear my mind and say, this is fucked up. Because as soon as like that all came along, that's what ruined everything. And unfortunately, in Dwayne's world and his experience, it kind of rolled into harder things. And a large part of that was his environment that he was in. The environment became very, very, very toxic. And, in witnessing what happened to Dwayne was incredibly sad. Because I realized that the things that we were losing was the things like our musical connection. One of the last things I ever jammed with Dwayne was a song called Meteorite, which is on my Music for Cats album. And I used to think when I'd walk away from a jam like that, how unique it was, how you just never hear anything like that again. And I always used to think that whenever I worked with Dwayne, or whenever I did, that there was never anything like it. So there was like some sort of marriage between everything, or the way that we could think that could create this space that made it special. But the saddest thing in the world was watching the demise of what happened. I know that there's been other challenges in the band, but I don't really speak about Ogre's world, about his challenges that he had with drugs. It's more his world, but I don't really have any deep knowledge of it. I know that I experienced Dwayne's more because we were together every day, together all the time. So I was witnessing, the demise of like the goodness of our side, which was really sad. So the sad thing is that there would be no more Doubting Thomas over the whole thing, and no more music. And I think one of the last things Dwayne ever said to me was, I just wish I could be back at the studio right now. And he died 2 days later after he said that. So was not the best of times. Minimum Riffage, I'm sad I had to miss this live stream for the past few months. Well, they always replay here. I don't have a specific question, but I'll say this album was a grower for me. I first bought it in 94 after discovering SP. So it was so different what I was expecting. I was fully immersed in the Too Dark Park Last Right sound. I put it away for a long time. Second issue came out, part of the Vault series. I listened again with fresh ears and found myself completely blown away by the sounds and the mood of it all. This and the Dragon Experience are such perfect albums to take me to another place. Yes, there are some deep liner notes, as written by Corey Goldberg, that are still available on the Litany website there. I've tried to cover most of those notes here today in my discussion. Dragon Experience is very much similar to Doubting Thomas in the sense that I guess you could say I was making music that was straying towards this direction. And in meeting Dwayne, of course, it would become natural that we would continue to make music that would stray in this direction. Jason Lupo, killer stuff. Thank you. Wraith, amazing record, very inspiring. My question is specifically in regards to the track White Wax. I immediately fell in love with the haunted circus vibe of it. What was this sound, something you pursued, or was it a happy accident? Yeah, I think I went into that a little earlier, where it was like a theme for a horror film as inspired by Clive Barker and mixed in the studio dynamically by Mr. Tom Ellard, Severed Heads. So yeah, big up Tom. Really fun collaborative. Greg on Earth, such an important release and musical journey. This one probably in my top 10 of all time. Soundtrack many trips as well. I love the generous use of radio sources, the overall density. Thank you. Imagine not having to carve out space for ogre vocals helped in some regards. It's interesting how spaces carve themselves out with sounds or words in ways that later you go back and wonder, without that, I wonder what the song would sound like. In many ways, this album also feels like more like a Missing Skinny Puppy album that ties Vivisect and Too Dark Park together more than Rabies in some ways. Though I loved Rabies, it felt like a departure from the continuity of the other SP releases. Was the studio set the same as Rabies for the Infidel? It was the same studio. We were in the bigger mixing facility for Rabies, which was a larger facility. We also did half of Rabies in Mushroom Studios, so we did not go to Mushroom for the Infidel. It was done entirely at Vancouver Studios, which I believe is now called Greenhouse Studios, possibly. I don't know if they still exist. On the track Father Don't Cry, we hear the gated arpeggiator line. Curious if this was the Pro 1. Yes, it was. And what was being used to gate the synth line? Well, actually, there was two. There's a gated Pro 1 and like a gated type synth line sound from the Mirage that Dwayne did, and it has a gated sound. We were not gating things yet in those days with any type of keyed gate, so that is an actual sound from the Mirage. This was not a hardware noise gate, if you can believe it. This is something we learned to do later. I think, believe it or not, the first person that ever asked me to gate a sound was Blixa Bargeld in Cyberactive. And I wondered what he was asking me to do. He was asking me, he wanted to play a piano that was going to open a noise gate to trigger a guitar. And I thought, well, a guitar wailing through an amp. I thought, this is a challenge. I've never had to do this before. What the fuck is he asking? Sorry, Blixa, but I managed to get it done. Funny. I've heard this technique in quite a few other SP songs as well. Cyberactive, Nothing Stays, and Morpheus Laughing, similar technique. But it sounds like the source synth. Yes, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we're talking about a particular Mirage patch. And I wish I could give you the answer, but that is a Dwayne technique for this time period. Gating synth sounds before we were doing that. Absolute Dwayne secret that goes down with him. We spoke about the Naomi McLeod collab on IDL. Fantastic, inspirational person. Matt G, this is one of my favorite all-time albums. Thank you for releasing the 20th anniversary with more material. Album seems to have a religious theme. Yeah, personally, from the title to the samples. Was that a deliberate choice? Did you and Dwayne talk about religion? Yes. Not so much religion as we talk about everything I've discussed throughout the course of this chat. Having feelings, having consideration, having deep emotions, and as the lady says in Nagwal tone, just want to escape. There's something beautiful about the way she says it. You're like going away somewhere. Hello, Tigers. Tiger wants to say hello to everybody. She always jumps up at some key point. It's always good to capture the kitties. Now we realize that some kitties aren't around sometimes. Tiger Lily is such a wonderful cat, you guys. She's very little. She's full grown. She's about to turn 4. And I'm going to say she's half the size of a regular cat we've had?
She's about 7 pounds.
7 to 8 pounds.
I don't think even 8.
But she's just tiny. And I love her so much. She really takes good care of me, you guys. So that's one thing that I really do have to say. Thank you to is cats. I've always had a thing about cats and feelings. I've always had deep feelings, right?
Mhm.
Overly emotional. Eve Tenebrae. I love the Infidel a great deal, no question.
Ooh, Tiger.
Oh, Tiger's knocking over stuff. Just an egomaniac's comment. A difficult to convey part of touring, both as a fan and crew later, another life, was a sense that even though I was geographically somewhere different every day, I felt to the same place with the same things and events and people. Writing fiction about this, I struggled to give my heroine a way to communicate it before being so pleased with myself for thinking of a vast phantom clock. It took slowly but inexorably drawing together all the steps that happened leading up to evening's first note. The imaginary clock was a link between different cities and days and governed this magic place she went every day. And then I looked up something in my TDP tour era diaries and realized I was neither clever nor original. That clocks had been that spectral countdown every night. Ah, well, what a great comment. I believe we have played clocks as intro music before shows before. It's safe to say, yeah, I'm pretty sure that we have. And it'll probably continue. I like doing this series of the things on the album. And next week, you guys are going to get a big announcement. And it could be that BRAP is going to become available for pre-order sooner than you think. It's incredibly exciting for me considering
It's only been about 3 years.
it's 4 years. It's been 4 years in the making. And by the way, there's the sounds of the SY1 Pearl's Concussion all over the Doubting Thomas album. Most notably in clocks. You hear the bee whoop whoop whoop. It's all the SY1. So with that, I'm going to pay tribute to it by making it possible that we absolutely have to have it available soon. And it's going to be a very special time. Yes, just take my thank you. Hi, Eric Peterson. Hello, Stormtrooper. Now that we have dogs and cats, I forget how crazy they can be. You know, this cat really is like a nice cat.
No, she's a psychopath.
You think so?
Yes.
She's
She's
does.
not trying to cuddle you when you're sleeping. She's trying to suffocate you.
Oh, you think so? So she has this thing where she likes to sleep like really close to my face, like practically on it. So she really has a thing about me. And remember, this is the only cat that's ever jumped on my head
That's on your head.
and sat on my head. Absolutely. Nako Face. Yes, you are going to hear about Nako Face. Of course, on the back of the shirts, on the back of the Lovely Fisherman shirt, and on the back of the I believe the musical cat, you'll see the Nako Face logo. Nako Face is a new project that I'm doing with somebody on the chat here, namely a name about 5 up from here, Eric Peterson. And we can't even tell you what we're doing. It's under a non-disclosure agreement. But one thing that I will tell you is that you will find out soon. And another thing I will tell you is that we have created around, I'm going to say 5 to 6 albums worth of material so far for said game. Uh-oh. I said, okay. Oh. Oop. That's it. Yeah. So I'll leave the mystery up to you guys. Scully, I see you there. Are you on the train? Scully has been on a train watching the chats, and he's not even telling us. He takes a train and goes and visits everybody out in Chicago, and oh, you're back home. But you know, he loves to take trains all across America, and even to Canada, he would take a train. And we're going to hear more about that soon. Yes, Nico Faces for a said project, and you guys are going to hear all about it soon. Scully, we'll have you on again here soon, and the same with your old pal Data Bomb, who's also here in the chat somewhere. I see you. He's our moderator. What would we do without our moderator, folks?
I'm a moderator.
Rana's our moderator too, but she happens to be sitting across from me right now. So
Drawing.
yeah. Anyways, I'd like to thank you guys for joining in for the chat today on Doubting Thomas. And I hope I've covered all the bases here of the album. If you don't have it and you've never heard it, take a listen to it. It might just be your cup of tea.
They're also available on our store at subcontoy.com.
Yes, go to subcontoy.com. And what are they available? Cassette?
The cassette and CD.
CD?
Yep, both CD.
Any vinyl?
No vinyl.
No vinyl. Just those ones I showed you are mine.
Yeah.
They're mine. Okay. Okay, that's a weird looking face. Okay, you guys. From the land of Boris and Basil. Over and out. Have a nice day, nice weekend, and we'll